Have you ever noticed something strange about attraction? The harder you try to win someone over, the more they seem to pull away. You text first, you plan the perfect dates, you open your heart completely, and somehow you become invisible. Meanwhile, that person who barely seems to care, who takes hours to respond, who remains mysteriously distant, they're the one keeping everyone up at night, wondering what they're thinking. It's maddening, isn't it? Everything we're taught about love and connection seems to work in reverse. Be vulnerable, they said. Show your feelings, they said. Prove how much you care. But here's the brutal truth nobody wants to admit. The very act of chasing often destroys what you're chasing. What if I told you this isn't an accident? What if this pattern reveals something fundamental about human psychology that most people will never understand? This phenomenon has a name, and understanding it will change how you see every relationship in your life. It's called the attraction paradox, and it reveals a psychological truth that cuts through centuries of romantic mythology. Attraction isn't logical, it's primal, and at its core lies something most people refuse to acknowledge: the raw, uncomfortable reality of power dynamics in human connection. Think about it. Every story you grew up with taught you that love is about sacrifice, about proving your worth, about putting someone on a pedestal and worshiping them until they finally see how devoted you are. Hollywood sold you the idea that persistence pays off, that the good guy always gets the girl, that if you just care enough, try hard enough, give enough of yourself, you'll win in the end. But look around. How is that working out for most people? We live in an age where dating apps have turned connection into a marketplace, where people ghost each other after months of conversation, where someone can claim to love you one day and act like you never existed the next. The old rules aren't just failing, they're actively sabotaging the very thing they promise to create. Here's what's really happening beneath the surface. Human beings, especially when it comes to attraction, are still operating on ancient programming. We might live in a digital world, but our brains are still wired for survival, for hierarchy, for the raw dynamics of power and status that kept our ancestors alive. And in this primal landscape, neediness isn't romantic, it's repulsive. Desperation doesn't inspire devotion, it triggers revulsion. This isn't about being cruel or manipulative. It's about understanding what actually creates lasting attraction versus what destroys it. Because once you see this pattern, you can't unsee it. And more importantly, you can finally stop sabotaging yourself and start creating the kind of magnetic presence that draws people to you naturally, without force, without games, without begging for scraps of attention. The attraction paradox matters now more than ever because we're living through a crisis of connection. People are lonelier despite being more connected than ever before. They're dating more but committing less. They're seeking authentic relationships while operating from completely inauthentic scripts about how attraction actually works. Understanding this paradox isn't just about getting better at dating, it's about reclaiming your power in every area of life. The biology of attraction: why neediness repels. Let's start with the uncomfortable truth that no one wants to discuss. Attraction operates on biological imperatives that have nothing to do with fairness or modern sensibilities. When you chase someone, when you make yourself constantly available, when you center your entire world around getting their approval, you're not demonstrating love, you're broadcasting weakness. Here's what happens in the brain when someone senses desperation. Mirror neurons fire, creating an unconscious response of repulsion. Not because the person is cruel, but because evolutionary programming recognizes neediness as a survival liability. Our ancestors who were too dependent, who couldn't function independently, were risks to the tribe's survival. That ancient wiring still exists today. Think about your own experience. When someone texts you obsessively, always agrees with you, rearranges their entire schedule for you, what do you feel? Probably not attraction, maybe pity, maybe annoyance, but definitely not the electric pull of genuine desire. You respect people who have their own lives, their own opinions, their own standards. The same principle applies to romantic attraction, but amplified. This is why the nice guy finishes last isn't about women preferring jerks. It's about them being biologically programmed to respond to strength, independence, and emotional stability. The man who doesn't need her validation becomes infinitely more valuable than the one who craves it. It's not personal, it's primal. The power dynamic. Who controls the frame? Every interaction has what psychologists call a frame, the underlying context that determines who's leading and who's following. In attraction, whoever controls the frame holds the power. And here's the brutal reality. The moment you start chasing, you hand over control completely. Picture the scenario. You meet someone amazing. Instead of maintaining your own life and letting things develop naturally, you immediately shift into pursuit mode. You initiate every conversation. You're always available. You make them the center of your universe. What you think you're communicating is devotion. What you're actually communicating is, I am beneath you, so I run after you. The person receiving this attention doesn't feel special, they feel burdened. Because now they're responsible for your emotional state. Your happiness depends on their response time, their mood, their attention. That's not romantic pressure, that's emotional hostage-taking. And most people, consciously or unconsciously, will start pulling away to escape that suffocating dynamic. Contrast this with someone who maintains their own frame. They're interested, but not desperate. They engage, but they're not always available. They have their own life, their own goals, their own emotional center that doesn't revolve around getting approval. This person becomes magnetic because they're offering something rare, the opportunity to earn access to someone who doesn't need you, but chooses you. The frame isn't about playing games or being manipulative. It's about understanding that healthy attraction requires polarity. Someone has to lead, someone has to set the pace, someone has to maintain standards. When you chase, you abdicate that role and force the other person to take it, often against their own instincts. The mystery factor. Why silence speaks louder than anything. Here's something that will change how you communicate forever. The most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. In our oversharing, social media-obsessed culture, silence has become the ultimate luxury. When you learn to be comfortable with gaps in conversation, with not explaining yourself, with letting others wonder what you're thinking, you become infinitely more intriguing. Most people, especially when they're attracted to someone, feel compelled to fill every silence, to explain every emotion, to make sure the other person understands exactly how they feel. This is the death of mystery. The moment someone has your complete manual, every insecurity, every need, every reaction, you become predictable. And predictable is the opposite of attractive. Think about the people you've been most drawn to in your life. Were they the ones who told you everything about themselves immediately, or were they the ones who revealed themselves slowly, leaving you curious and wanting more? The answer is obvious, but most people do the opposite when they're interested in someone. This doesn't mean being secretive or dishonest. It means understanding that revelation should be earned, not given freely. When you make someone work slightly to understand you, to earn your openness, to access your emotional world, that effort creates investment, and investment creates value. What comes too easily is rarely treasured. The most magnetic people understand this instinctively. They share enough to create connection, but hold enough back to maintain intrigue. They're present when they're with you, but they don't need to be with you constantly. They have rich inner lives that don't revolve around any one person, and that independence becomes irresistibly attractive. The test phenomenon. Why challenge creates connection. Here's something that might shock you. When someone seems to be pushing you away, testing your boundaries, or creating conflict, they might actually be trying to get closer to you. Not consciously, but instinctively. Human beings test what they value to make sure it's real, it's strong, it can withstand pressure. Think about how children test their parents' rules, not because they want chaos, but because they need to feel the security of boundaries that hold firm. The same dynamic happens in adult relationships. When someone is attracted to you, part of them will unconsciously test your strength, your consistency, your ability to maintain your frame under pressure. This is where most people fail catastrophically. The moment someone pulls back, acts moody, seems less interested, or creates some kind of challenge, the average person responds with more effort, more attention, more proof of their devotion. This is exactly backwards. The test was designed to see if you'll maintain your strength, not to see if you'll crumble. The person who passes these tests, who remains calm, who doesn't chase, who maintains their own emotional stability regardless of someone else's mood, becomes incredibly attractive because they've proven they can be trusted with someone's emotional chaos without losing themselves in it. They become a source of strength rather than another problem to manage. This doesn't mean being cold or unresponsive. It means understanding that your role isn't to fix someone else's emotions or prove your worth through increasingly desperate gestures. Your role is to remain anchored in your own center, offering stability without sacrificing your own peace.
Building gravitational pull, becoming the prize. The ultimate shift happens when you stop trying to win someone over and start becoming someone worth winning over. This isn't about arrogance or superiority. It's about developing such a rich, purposeful, fulfilling life that others naturally want to be part of it. Most people approach attraction backwards. They meet someone they like and immediately start rearranging their life around that person. They cancel plans, they change their priorities, they make themselves completely available. What they don't realize is that they're destroying the very qualities that made them attractive in the first place. The magnetic person does the opposite. They have a mission, a purpose, a life they're building that's bigger than any one relationship. When someone enters their world, they're welcome to join, but they're not gonna derail the whole operation. This creates what psychologists call gravitational pull. The sense that being around this person means being part of something larger and more exciting than yourself. This is why successful people, people with passion, people who are going somewhere in life, tend to be naturally attractive regardless of their physical appearance. They're not desperately seeking completion from another person because they're already complete. They're offering partnership, not dependence. The practical application is simple but requires discipline. Before you can attract someone worth having, you need to become someone worth being with. Develop skills, pursue goals, build relationships, create experiences that fulfill you independently. When you do this consistently, you stop chasing because you don't need to. You become the person others chase, not through manipulation, but through the natural magnetism of someone who has built something worth joining. So, here's what we've learned about the attraction paradox. It's not a cruel joke the universe is playing on you, it's a fundamental law of human psychology that you can either fight against or flow with. The people who struggle with attraction are usually fighting against it, trying to force connection through effort, attention, and emotional labor. The people who naturally attract others understand that real magnetism comes from internal strength, not external performance. The shift isn't about becoming cold or calculating. It's about becoming complete. When you stop looking for someone to complete you and start completing yourself, everything changes. You stop being needy because you're not lacking anything essential. You stop chasing because you're not running from emptiness. You stop performing because you know your worth isn't determined by someone else's approval. This applies far beyond dating. In your career, your friendships, your family relationships, the same principle holds. People are drawn to those who have something to offer, not those who desperately need something to take. When you embody this truth, you not only become more attractive, you become more powerful, more peaceful, and paradoxically, more connected to others than ever before. If this video resonated with you, if it helped you see your relationships through a different lens, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your experience. Have you noticed this pattern in your own life? When did you realize that chasing was actually pushing people away? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Take a moment right now to think about one relationship where you've been doing all the pursuing. What would happen if you pulled back, focused on your own growth, and let the other person come to you? Try it for just 1 week and see what shifts. And if you want more content like this, raw, honest explorations of human psychology that actually help you understand yourself and others better, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Every subscriber helps this message reach someone who needs to break free from the attraction paradox and reclaim their power. Thanks for watching, And remember, the moment you stop needing to be chosen is the moment you become unforgettable.